Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Isis, Imitation of Life. The Goddess Next Door helps a young black girl overcome racism during the era of Jim Crow in this Golden Age Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Imitation of Life in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
Better get the coleslaw, y'all, because we're having us a barbecue. I got a chance to take a look at the trailer for the new Batman animated series, Batman Cape Crusader. And while I was really floored by the very dynamic designs from legendary 1990s Batman the Animated Series creator Bruce Timm, and I was really impressed with the very fluid animation that really reminded me of the old 1940s Fleischer Superman cartoons and the overall aesthetic design that took us back to the golden age of Batman comics that were created by legendary Batman creators Bill Finger and Bob Kane. I was not really happy with the way they presented Police Commissioner Gordon in this new animated series. Now, Bruce Timm, Amazon, and Warner Brothers have decided to race swap Commissioner James Gordon and his daughter Barbara Gordon to be black characters, and I took deep offense at the presentation of Commissioner James Gordon and his daughter Barbara Gordon as black characters because they don't really fit within the context of history and the presentation of a black Commissioner James Gordon and a black Barbara Gordon really are presentations that really minimize the racism that black people went through during those dark days of Jim Crow in the South and the discrimination that black people endured in the North. And I took deep offense to this because you're basically, with this series, looking to try to minimize black history and minimize the dark history that black people went through in that period and make it like that racism that many generations of my ancestors did not go through. You're trying to deny that this racism that black people went through by presenting us, again, a passive-aggressive attempt to promote diversity and inclusion. And while these passive-aggressive attempts may fit the context of modern times with modern adaptations of series like the new Superman series where they have a black James Olsen for the second time, and like they had in the Supergirl series that was on CW and CBS where they had a black James Olsen. Yes, that can fit in modern times, and you can also, in those modern times of the movie like The Batman, have Jeffrey Rush playing a black Commissioner Gordon. A black Commissioner Gordon and a black Barbara Gordon do not fit within the historical context of the 1930s, of the golden age where Batman is being presented in this series. And again, I take deep offense to that because, again, this is a minimization of black history, a minimization of the racism black people encountered in that time, and basically dismisses all of the struggles that black people went through as related to the civil rights movements that came almost 20 years later, and is a basic disrespect directed at foundational black Americans and all of the struggles we had to try to overcome in order to achieve civil rights in this country. That is what I saw presented when I saw that image of a black Commissioner Gordon and a black Barbara Gordon. I saw Warner Brothers insensitively going out here and presenting a series of black characters without regard for ever acknowledging any of the struggles that black people went through in this country. Now, as a writer of fantasy fiction that features black characters, I was, again, just deeply offended by this, and again, deeply offended because I know the history of foundational black Americans in this country, and I know that in the 1930s, where this series is set, black people were dealing with struggles in this country as related to racism and white supremacy. And as we dealt with those struggles in two parts of the country, we dealt with racism and as related to the written laws of Jim Crow in the South, which made us a second-class citizen, similar to what they had in the Constitution as related to being 3/5 of a person. Black people suffered being dehumanized in the South and didn't see much change when many participated in the Great Migration that took place when many black people went up north to find a better life. Now, many black people, as we went and migrated up to the north, we ran into a lot of racism, and that prevented us from being able to get equal opportunity for jobs. Many black people who even had college degrees and were qualified to be able to get good jobs here in places like New York City were oftentimes denied opportunities to get those jobs due to discrimination policies that were the unwritten social rule of life in the North. And these unwritten social rules as related to life in the North made it where many educated professional black folks could not get jobs with municipalities, and this is a historical fact. I remember doing research and reading that black people couldn't even apply for jobs such as conductor or motorman as related to the Metropolitan Transportation Authority here in New York, and they could not get jobs even though they had law degrees, were licensed doctors. They couldn't get jobs in hospitals and places like that. No, many black people, because of the unwritten social rules of discrimination and the racism in Jim Crow, the only way they could go out here and make a living was because either they had their own businesses, or many who had college degrees from universities like Spelman, what they had to do was go and start their own businesses, because the only job that many black folks could get at the time due to racism and Jim Crow was jobs like Pullman Porter, jobs like janitor, and this is because the racists didn't want to see a black person in these jobs, and they didn't even want to see a black person in these jobs because they had been pushing a white supremacist agenda, and in order to keep their world smooth, what they did was go out here and want to make sure that all the black people were at the bottom of the world, and Batman Cape Crusader basically dismisses all of those struggles that my brothers and sisters and my descendants went through. And I look at that and I just take really deep offense to this series, because you're going out here and minimizing all of the struggles that black people went through in this country by saying, oh, James Gordon, a black man, is in a position of power, a position he would never be allowed to have in the 1930s, because the racists in both the South and the North would never allow a black man to have that kind of power at all in this country. No, in those days where white supremacy was dominant, what they would just be absolutely flabbergasted at the idea of a black police commissioner, let alone a black police officer. Yes, there were some black guys who did get jobs as cops, but oftentimes they were beat cops or just working in the station house, but they never really were able to rise up through the ranks due to the discrimination that black people suffered. And this whole Black Commissioner Gordon, again, is something that is not in the context of history, not in the context of history at all, but again, the social justice and far left types think that this is proper diversity and inclusion for this adaptation, but this is not what was a part of history, nor was it a part of comic book lore, and nor does it have a place in this series as I see it. Now, when it comes to black characters, there is a place for them, and there's a way to go out and present a story about black characters in the 1930s. I know I've done this myself. I did it in a story that I wrote, as part of the fantasy flashback series called Isis Imitation of Life. And in the story Isis Imitation of Life, I presented a story where the character of Isis is showing how she's a hero in the dark days of Jim Crow. And in the dark days of Jim Crow, black people had to move very differently because of the racism that was going on and the terrorism that was going on all throughout this country. Because while a lot of people believed that, oh, there was just lynchings in the South going on at the time, and there was also other forms of terrorism. Terrorism where black people were getting their businesses burnt down, terrorism where black people were getting their homes burnt down, and even in some parts of the country, because this is not just something that happened in the South. Mr. Superboy talked about this on his channel all the time. In the Midwest, there was a special kind of racism in places like sundown towns where a black person needed to be home before sundown because the racists would, if they saw a black person on the street, they would kill them, or that person would be going out to work, or they would go to the store and they would just basically disappear and never be found again. And this is the history that Bruce Timm, Warner Brothers, and Amazon are minimizing with this black Commissioner Gordon. They are minimizing the history of black people and the suffering that many of us went through in those days of the 1930s, making it like, oh, there would be a black commissioner when a black commissioner would be dealing with a whole lot of racism. He'd be dealing with death threats, if not people in his own police force looking to kill him. Because, again, many white racists out here and non-black racists, this is another thing people don't want to talk about, is that there were non-black racists who were Irish and German and other types of people. Even Hispanics and Asians were racist towards black people. So there was no great American melting pot of diversity back then. It was the whole lot of anti-black racism. And that's where I got a bone to pick with the producers of this series and the whole idea of giving us a black Commissioner James Gordon and a black Barbara Gordon. And they're sitting there thinking, oh, this is going to be a good thing. No, what this does is basically, again, is another passive-aggressive attempt to passively race swap characters to fit them into a story where they don't fit historically, instead of giving a black creator like myself an opportunity to be able to tell a story with an original black character. Tell a story with an original black character that shows that character in the context of history properly, being a hero by going out here and presenting a positive image of black people. That's what I did with the story Isis Imitation of Life, where I showed how black people were black heroes in the Golden Age, and our approach to heroing was not putting on capes and tights. No, our approach to being a hero was just going out here and presenting a positive image of us as human beings, a positive image of us as human beings by showing us as being intelligent, showing us being polished and well-dressed, showing us being articulate and well-spoken. That was the image of being a hero to us in the community, seeing those brothers and sisters in their finest clothes, seeing our brothers and sisters having good manners, seeing our brothers and sisters showing how we can carry and conduct ourselves as human beings in a country where we were told in much of that media that we were basically, again, caricatures of people. We were presented in the most negative light in media, presented as lazy, incompetent coons, presented as sexually promiscuous and sexually deviant black brutes who went out here lusting after white women to the point where white racists had to kill and lynch a black man, sexually promiscuous black Jezebels, and emasculating black sapphires. These were the images of black people that were presented in most media in the 30s that dehumanized us and degraded us and promoted anti-black narratives that led to a lot of black men not being seen as responsible, conscientious men who cared for their families, because in the face of history, again, there were lots of responsible black men and women who were building black families. We have the highest marriage rate as related to black families from the 1930s to about the 1950s. And all of that is a part of black history. Black history that basically this Batman Cape Crusader series erases and does not really acknowledge by this black Commissioner Gordon. Now, yes, again, there were educated black professionals and there were educated black people in circles like the Boule, and there were all of these different aspects of black life. And again, when I look at this series, it doesn't really focus on any of that because Bruce Timm and the people at Warner Brothers did not do their research on black culture the way I do my research on black culture to write books like Isis Imitation of Life, books like Spellbound, books like John Haynes' 1987, and books like Esteem the Sands of Time. When I go out here and I'm writing about black characters in periods of black history, I always want to acknowledge even the parts of history that people are uncomfortable about. And I do that because I want people to understand how black people maintain their humanity in the face of all of the adversity that we faced during those dark times of Jim Crow and those dark times when this country went out here and had people presenting anti-black racism as a social norm. I wanted to show how we were heroes by just showing our humanity and showing our character. And I do that because I want to pay respect to all of those black people who came before me, like my father and my grandfather and my descendants who went out here and presented a positive face of self in the face of terrorists like the Ku Klux Klan, in the face of people in media who presented caricaturized images of black people that showed us as the least of humanity. I want to show us in the way we really were, because I remember going down to the Schomburg Library to see the Stereotypes and Human Types exhibit, and that exhibit really made me think about how we were presented, because media from the 1930s presented us in the worst way. This is where we got the images of the mammy. This is where we got the images of the coon. This is where we got the images of the brute. And the literature, like these books that showed black men as, again, brutes, and media that showed black women as sexually promiscuous Jezebels, I want to show that in context as related to history, show it in context as related to history, to show that black people, we were not this in real life. No, I wanted to show us as being human beings. And I took deep offense as related to Batman Cape Crusader, because this story, again, passively presents you a hero in Batman, but aggressively shows you how the people behind the scenes really are villains by trying to erase black history. Now, that era of black history may make some people uncomfortable, but there's a lot we can learn from that era of black history, even though it's one that makes many whites and non-blacks uncomfortable because they have to actually see the racism that their ancestors put black people through and see all the cruel things they did to black people. I want people to see that, yes, that did go on, that was a part of life, but black people, we had the strength of character to go on and persevere in the face of that adversity. And that's what I put in my story, Isis Imitation of Life. And if I could go out here being a small independent writer and publisher and publish a story that shows black people dealing with racism in history as related to being in that era, and make it historically accurate, then why can't Warner Brothers do this for their new Batman Cape Crusader series? Critical question I want to ask Bruce Timm and the producers over at Warner Brothers and Amazon. Why can't you go out here and show things in its proper context? You could have just kept the white Commissioner Gordon and white Barbara Gordon and showed how Barbara Gordon was dealing with sexism in that time, because women basically were in a place where they were dealing with a lot of sexism and they did not have rights like you thought they have today. Yes, there were women in different jobs, but they couldn't go but so far. And if you're going to show a series in the 1930s, show us that series in the context of time and show us how far we've progressed. Either you show it historically accurate or you don't show it at all. And in the case, again, of black people, we don't need token characters to be presented in a historically inaccurate context. No, there are other creators out here just like me who can create stories that feature black characters in the proper context of history, feature us and tell our stories. We don't need token diversity characters that basically erase our history. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a black creator. I've been a comic fan for over 40 years, and this presentation of Batman, again, is not one that I want to watch, not one I want to watch because, again, even though it has great animation and great design, the storytelling really is not there for me because you're going out here and putting identity politics over story to the point where you're looking to erase black history. And I'm not with erasing black history. No, I'm about teaching black history so that black children can learn what our ancestors went through, because everything our ancestors went through in that time is one of the reasons why I am so for reparations, because black men and black women back then never got a chance to actualize their potential due to the terrorism that black people endured in the Jim Crow South and the racism and discrimination black people endured in the North. And I look at this whole Cape Crusader series, and I don't see anything heroic about a series that goes out here and actively looks to erase black history and prevent people from seeing the truth about what black people like myself endured and continue to endure every day in the face of racism and white supremacy. Now, if you want to learn how black people were heroes in the time of the days of Jim Crow and discrimination, you can pick up my story, ISIS Imitation of Life, which is available in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com. And you can find that book by clicking the link in the description box. You can also find it at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And I also write other historical fiction books that show you different eras of time. I have Esteem the Sands of Time, which shows you a time travel romance that's set in ancient Egypt. I also have Spellbound, a novel that is set in the 1980s. The legendary Mad Matilda, which is set in 1995. And I also have a John Hayes story, John Hayes 1987. And that story is set in the 1980s. And all of these stories, again, are all set in times. And I did extensive research to make sure that people could see what life is like in that time in the proper historical context. And if you want to pick up those stories to see how stories are written in a proper historical context and show you how you can do black fantasy characters and still fit them in a certain era. I also forgot to mention Eternal Night, which is set in 1994. You can find all of these books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos about comics, science fiction, and fantasy, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App, and I will use that money to buy new independent comics from independent creators, and also in an effort to pay for the covers for many of the books that I publish on the SJS Direct imprint. And also I want to raise funds to make the next SJS Direct comic. All of those efforts I'm trying to work out, and I need your help to do that. So if you guys could drop a donation, it'd be greatly appreciated. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Esteem the Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of Esteem the Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.